Hi, stitching friends. I'm Amy. I'm the Globetrotting Stitcher. It is nice to be back with you today. We've had a long gap since the last time we filmed an update, so you may want to have an extra cup of coffee at the ready because this is going to be a long video. Just because it has been so long, this is essentially going to be a mid-year WIP update, and then I'll be sharing a little bit at the end about my trip to Kenya that I took a couple of weeks ago. So hopefully you'll all enjoy that. So I think a couple of quick announcements and updates and just getting you up to speed on what we've been up to. As I said, I had a really good trip to Kenya, and we'll share more about that later. Gary got a little bit of swag when I came home, which he doesn't normally, but maybe we can show you that at some point. And then Gary also, right after I got back from my trip, he had to go to Rhode Island for a big family reunion. His family has a big reunion every couple of years, and so he went over for that. We had actually planned for both of us to go to that, and you guys, ticket prices were ridiculous, like so ridiculous. So we were like, well, we can afford to send one person, but two people is a problem. So he had to go without me, and I stayed home with the doggos. I think a couple of other things, just for those who are interested in our squirrel food bank. The squirrels seem to have moved on to greener pastures. They've left a few of their pine cones behind, but I haven't been seeing anyone out there feasting, and the pile doesn't seem to be changing. So I think they're looking for an alternative diet at this point. So maybe it's time for us to move the pine cones elsewhere. So we'll see what we do with that. And then I also wanted to mention, so in our last update, Gary was telling you he'd been working on finishing up a mini documentary, and said that we would share a link to that. And so just to say that work is all done, and his video is now posted on his YouTube channel. So we are going to have a link for that in the description box below. So if you're interested in seeing the project that he worked on, please go take a look at that. Leave him a comment. So yeah, it turned out really great. I thought he did a fantastic job on it. And then one other quick thing for those of you who are lovers of Bear and Sophie, you may see Sophie in her window guardian responsibilities behind me at some point during the video today. And if you do, you will note the presence of a donut. So on her neck. So Sophie had to have surgery this last week. We discovered she had a little polyp that had developed that we noticed several months back. And so we've been keeping an eye on it with our vet, and we'd noticed that it seemed like it was starting to really bother her. And so we talked with the vet and decided to go ahead and have it removed. And right a couple of days before she went in to have that removed, she also, so last year, she developed a cyst on her tail. And that's been another thing that we've been monitoring with her vet. And so when it first developed, the vet measured it and took some samples and all this stuff and said, it's a benign cyst. It's nothing you need to worry about, but we'll keep an eye on it. Well, a couple of days before she went in for surgery, her cyst got really big all of a sudden, and was like oozing nasty stuff. And it was bothering her. So when she went in for surgery in the morning, I talked to the doctor and I was like, listen, since she's going to be under, can we, is there anything we can do to kind of like check out what's going on here, get this thing cleaned out, get a sample, and make sure that this isn't turning into something more concerning? Because when the cyst had first developed, we had talked about whether surgery was an option to have it taken off. And at the time, the doctor had told us we try not to operate on the tail unless we absolutely have to, because it tends to have problems healing. And so she said, yep, we'll see what we can do about getting it cleaned up and making sure there's nothing that's problematic. Well, oddly enough, while she was in for surgery, they never could find her polyp. So they think it's just gone away on its own, which is great. But they went in to start kind of cleaning up that cyst on her tail. And as they started working on it, they were able to just take it right off without any problems. The doctor said, I was really surprised, but it just came off super cleanly. They sent it off, and we've already got the results back. It was still a benign cyst, but now it's off of her tail. And so I think she's recovering really well. She's feeling better. We're feeling good about it. So all that to say, if you see the donut in action, she's doing great. And so I think she's feeling a lot better already. I think the last thing I wanted to tell you guys about was a new Flosstube channel that I have discovered in the last couple of weeks. And it's actually, the channel itself isn't all that new, but it's a new to me Flosstube channel. So it's a married couple, and the channel is called Mad Morty and the Brom. And I always love seeing couples stitching and sharing together for obvious reasons. But what really kind of caught my eye is the screenshot for this particular one. This channel, the video, their most recent video, just showed up in my feed as a suggested video by YouTube, and it was a screenshot of Brom, who is the male part of the stitching duo, and he has this kind of like, at least now I don't know if this is his normal look, but like in this particular screenshot in this video, he has like this kind of like American biker dude vibe. So he's wearing a dark shirt, and he's like a big broad-shouldered guy, and he's got the beard, and he was wearing a bandana, and I was like, this guy looks like he's about to go get on his bike and hit the road. And I was intrigued by that because I was just like, okay, a biker dude that stitches. This sounds really cool. So I put their video in my queue, and it came up, and I was watching it, and imagine my shock when he opens his mouth, and they're a British couple, and he's got this very mild-mannered kind of style, just like British accent, and it totally doesn't, obviously he's not an American biker dude, and I was like, that's not at all what I was expecting. So, but at any rate, I really just enjoyed their channel. I enjoyed their chemistry and how they are together. I like the things they're working on. He is stitching a Quaker design that's like, it's called Duck Quaker, I think, and it says quack on it, which I thought was hysterical. So, so yeah, go check out Mad Morty and the Brom. I think you'll really enjoy them if you haven't discovered them already. So yeah, I think that's it for updates. Let's get into the stitchy stuff because we have a lot to share with you today. So the first thing I have to show you is a finish. I did finally have a finish in my travel category. So I'm stitching my way through the Christmas Cheer Pin Pillows set of charts by Jeanette Douglas Designs. I am stitching all of them on 36 count Stars Hollow Blend linen by R&R Reproductions, and I'm using the called for flosses. And I have been working on the Happy Holidays pillow. So the last time you saw this, I had almost finished stitching the border. I had put in quite a bit, and I was working on filling in the details on the poinsettias that are up at the top of the design. And I had started stitching the word happy. So I took this with me on my trip to Kenya, and on my, oh, that was a near disaster. On my flight home, I finished it. So that's how it turned out. Really sweet, really cute. This was a fun stitch, and it felt like this one went fairly quickly. So I quite liked it. Some of you might remember early on I had a mini, I wouldn't call it a disaster, but my border met up and yet was still wrong. And so I had a bit of frogging to do, but all came right in the end. And so looking forward to turning that one into a pillow. But that is my Happy Holidays pillow by Jeanette Douglas Designs. The next piece I have to share with you is my sampler. And so this, I am working on Blackberry House by Plum Street Samplers. I am stitching this on 36 count platinum Edinburgh linen by it's just a plain old Zweigert fabric. And I am using the called for flosses. Sorry, I'm a little distracted trying to get this on my board here. I am doing this piece in as a stitch along, part of a stitch along group. So I've been working with Sarah, who is Stitch Addict on Instagram, Paula from Stitching in High Heels, as well as a couple of other folks who are not floss tubers. And Sarah's actually, I believe, already finished hers. So the last time you saw this, I had finished all the stitching in the vase bowl kind of thing that holds the arrangement. I had finished almost all of the stitching on the right-hand side of the piece, everything down to the bowl or the vase. Had started stitching in quite a bit of the left-hand side, and then had also started stitching the outline of the cartouche at the bottom where the alphabet goes. So I took this with me to Nairobi, and this is where I got to. So decent progress, not great progress. And that was just because, again, this was it was a busy trip in some other ways. We had some really long days. I also really struggled with jet lag on this trip in a way that I normally don't. So I had a number of evenings where I was really tired, and was just, trying to stay awake and was too tired to stitch. So between that and some long days of meetings and calls and things like that in the evening, I just didn't get as much done as I had hoped. But what I did do is I did finish filling in all of the stitching on the left-hand side down to here. So the only thing I have left to do here is put in my initials and the year. You can see I also did a good bit of fill-in on this like purple, gray, brown house over here, which is really pretty. I don't think I added any more to the outline of the cartouche, but I started filling in more of this kind of berry decorative elements at the top. And then worked on stitching in my dad's name. So many of you, those of you who have been watching us for a while, know I am stitching this in honor of my dad. And the hashtag for that is Blackberries for Dad, SAL. And so I followed Sarah's lead, where she was also personalizing her sampler for a family member. And so instead of stitching the alphabet down here, she chose to stitch her family member's name and, birthday and so on. And she very kindly charted that out for me. So what I did, I had to move a few things around to make it work. But these birds and berries, I went ahead and plugged in on either side of my dad's name. So it creates nice balance. Got his name fully in, and I'm well set up to kind of stitch in his birth date down here, although I haven't started that yet. So not a ton of progress, but not bad, all things considered. If I hadn't been traveling the week I worked on this, I think I would have finished it. So I'm pretty sure it'll be a fairly quick finish the next time it comes up. But that is my Blackberries for Dad, or Blackberry House by Plum Street Samplers. So next, how about we go to Gary to talk about what he's been working on.
All right. I'll go with this one first. So I'm working on that musician guy. I believe they call him Louis Armstrong. It's called Louis Armstrong. It's by Stitching Jewels Designs. And I'm stitching it on 16 count white Aida with black DMC. So the last time you saw it, I don't remember the last time you saw it. It's been so long since I worked on it. Anyway, so the last time that you saw it, I don't believe I had too much more done in terms of there are 10 pages. I'm currently working on page 1. I don't know that I had too much done on page 1, but here's where it is now. As you can see, there's not a whole lot more. There's some, but I literally lost the motivation to do it for a little while. So that's just the way it goes. But this is where it is now. I really have a busy week ahead of me, so I don't know if I'm going to get to it this week, but I'll see. Anyway, that's where Louis Armstrong is now, and I'm sure it'll be further along later. All right, the next one is Women Who Behave. And this is by Sue Hillis Designs. It's stitched on 16 count black rock salt Aida by Color and Cotton with the called for DMC. This one, I thought, at least for me anyway, was just going to be a quick stitch and move anywhere there. So the last time you saw it, I think I just started the W in women or something. If I started anything, I don't remember. At any rate, so I finished, again, this is another one. I didn't put as much time as I could have on it, but I did put a little on it last night so that I'd have some progress for today. But at any rate, this has what's called a quarter stitch. Well, anyway, the last time you saw it, it looked like that. This is what it looks like now. Anyway, they have, like if you look at the numbers, or the letters rather, right at the top, they'll have a quarter stitch. And I had no idea what that was. And then Amy showed me, and I thought, well, what kind of torture type person would just ask folks to do that? Because for those of you who don't know what a quarter is, but if I have a square and I break that square into 4 sections, you basically do a cross stitch in one of those remaining 4 sections. Maybe I'll do a graphic that shows that. But at any rate, so I'm sure this has something to do with it, but if you're in like a 16 count, whatever, right, black rock salt Ada, then it's a pretty small square, and you have to make a square in the upper left, bottom right, or upper whatever, the other corners. So I learned how to do that. I'm also getting better at backstitch, because if you look at the W, you can see it now, where before it just looked like these straight lines. And then I put the half stitch or quarter stitches in, and then there you have it. So I'm going to keep working on this, but it's going to take longer than I thought, because those quarter stitches, they're not easy for me. I'm just learning them. Maybe I'll get better, but at any rate. So I'll finish what I can when I can for the next one. When that will be, I don't know, but you know, that's what the size of that. So anyway, yeah, so over to Amy there.
Okay, so the next piece that we will show you is my full coverage. I am stitching Rose Trellis in by Heaven and Earth Designs, 2/1 on, what am I stitching this on? 28 count white Lugana, and I'm using a combination of half stitch and continental stitch on this. So the last time you saw it, I had pretty well finished the stitching. So the bottom section of the house is, there's like, or the bottom like floor of the house, or the end, there's like 3 sections. And, words. So I had, the first section has like the front entryway, and there's the hostess of the inn. She's standing there welcoming guests. And so the last time you saw this, I had kind of finished as much of that section as I will be doing this year, and started stitching her, and had started stitching a little bit of the middle section of the house. So here's where this is right now. So as you can see, I've almost finished. I'm very close to the end now on stitching this heart border that's up on the second terrace, or the second level. I'm almost finished with the roof over the porch as well. And I've now stitched the full kind of the left-hand side of this middle section. I've stitched in most of this little heart sign that hangs here. Stitched in a lot of the window, as well as this hanging basket of flowers. And then have also started stitching in the paneling on this side of the house. So with this, a couple of things that I wanted to mention. This hanging basket, there is enough confetti to start your own party supply store. This thing was, I won't say it was a nightmare, but it was not fun to stitch. You can actually feel how much thicker this is, because of all the threads that are in here, than other parts of the piece. It's just super thick, tons of confetti. So, and it just took a lot of time to stitch. So I'm really glad that that is done, but it was a time commitment. The other thing that I was happy to be able to get to, is this hanging heart sign that is here. And there was actually something I was kind of curious for opinions on with this. So in the original picture, this little sign says mint tea and scones, 50 cents. And just because of the way that the stitching translates into full coverage, you can see that there's writing on it, but you can't at all tell what it says. And so I was kind of debating with myself as I was working on it, whether, even though it's not charted, whether I should backstitch in mint tea and scones, or just leave it and not worry about it. And so I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts. I don't know how I feel about doing that on a full coverage piece. I mean, it'd be kind of nice to actually be able to read the sign, but I don't know. It might look kind of weird. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Have you ever altered a full coverage piece, and what are your thoughts? One other thing I wanted to mention that I was really excited about is in this section of the lower level of the house, on the front porch, there's an older couple that is sitting there having some dessert and drinking their tea and just having a nice time on the porch. And so this last time as I was working, I also got to stitch down, and you can see here where I stitched the lady's hair and have started stitching in her face. So really fun to have more of these elements of the design showing up as we continue across this row of pages. All right. The next WIP that I have to share with you is my fancy lady. So I am working on At the Met by Mirabilia. I am stitching this on a piece of 32 count Aztec red linen by Weeks Dye Works, and I am stitching with all of the called for flosses, except I have changed I've done a skin conversion. The original skin tone on the woman is it's a white woman, and I've changed her to an African American woman. But aside from that, everything else is called for. I also have done a conversion so that I did her skin 1/1 rather than 2/2 as everything else is. So, oh, actually, I'm showing you what she looks like, and I didn't tell you what she looked like the last time. Surprise!
She didn't have no dress.
She did. That's right. The last time you saw her, I had done her left arm and the bodice of her dress. I'd started on her right arm. So that was where she was.
You know, we could cut this so that comes first.
That's okay.
All right.
Here's where she is now. Surprise!
They would never know.
They would never know. But I'd have to talk about that one again, wouldn't I?
What?
Wouldn't I have to talk about rose trellis?
No, I was talking about, I could take where you said that the last time you saw it and move it in front. It's an editing joke.
Oh,
Never mind.
okay. We're moving on.
Yep.
Woo! None of y'all saw that. So, here's where she is now. As you can see, there was like a lot of celebration happening because I finished the last of her 1/1 skin. So her her right arm and hand are now done. I've stitched more down her skirt and done some more of this really beautiful sash or belt that she's wearing. I have also, one of the things that I really wanted to do, so those of you who have stitched Mirabilia charts know that because these are such large designs, typically you've got a big sheet of paper, and one side of that paper has the top half of the design and the other has the bottom half of the design. So I have now completely finished the top half of the design, and I'm just going to be in the bottom half. Everything up here is completely done. So one of the other things I really focused on doing besides finishing up that skin was getting all of these, she's got all of these strands of beads and necklaces and things that she's wearing. So I finished stitching the top parts of all of those, and I'm starting to carry those down. I didn't really do anything in the archway on the sides here at all because I really wanted to focus on getting that top half finished. I will tell you, as I was working on her this time, I found myself thinking that I would never wear all of these strands of beads hanging off like this woman is, because if I did, I would kill myself. I am not known for being graceful, and I would inevitably trip within 5 minutes on something and fall down. So she's a brave woman. But anyway, that is where she is. She is so sparkly and very, very bead heavy, but very, very pretty. And I'm really excited because I feel like now that 1/1 skin is finally finished, I'm going to be able to make progress on her much more quickly going forward. All right. Let's see. The last WIP that I have to share with you. Oh, let me grab here. Yeah, the last WIP I have to share with you is my weekend stitch. So I am working on Butterfly Port Mauve by Heaven and Earth Designs. I'm stitching this 2/1 on 28 count white easy grid Lugana. And again, I am doing a combination of half stitch and continental stitch. So the last time you saw this, I was at about 15,900 stitches, and I've put in almost 1,000, but not quite since the last time you saw it. So here's where it is right now. So it probably doesn't look a ton different. I did fill in some more of the background up here on as we're moving down the page. Probably the thing that was most exciting as far as kind of a newish element. So over the last month or so, the shape of these white flower buds has been starting to emerge a bit. And so yesterday, as I worked on this, I got to the stitches where I get to start filling those in a bit. And one of those is actually a Krynic, which I have not used a Krynic before on a full coverage. And so I was a little nervous because it's a bit thick and rough compared to DMC. And I was just like, how is that going to go with 1/1? Is that going to be a real headache? So far, so good. And it's nice because it gives just a touch of shimmer to those flowers that I think is really pretty. You probably can't see the fill in just because it's white on white. And so it doesn't stand out in the same way other colors would. But I'm happy with how it's coming on. So we'll just continue to plug away on that. All right, so that is it for WIPs, but I do have a couple of new starts to share with you. So the first new start, when I finished, so as I mentioned, I finished my Happy Holidays pin pillow. Let's see, where am I here? Finished that while I was on my last trip. And so since I had a little bit more time on my flight before I got home, I decided to go ahead and get started on the next of the pin pillows. And so I decided to go ahead and tackle the biggest one of all, which is the Merry Christmas pillow. Again, this is part of the Christmas Cheer Pin Pillows chart pack by Jeanette Douglas Designs, and I'm stitching all of them on 36 count Stars Hollow Blend linen using the called for flosses. So here's where we are. Not too bad for a brand new start. Just working on the border at this point. But I'm fairly certain it's coming along pretty well already, and I'm fairly certain I'll be able to start moving in and doing some of the more central elements of the design fairly soon here. So pretty respectable for a new start, and it's nice to have more than one color in there to show you at this point. And then the other new start that I have to share with you is one that I'm really excited about. So we recently did a new project poll as I was trying to decide what to start for my next wildcard stitch. And we were telling you the last time we filmed an update that we did have, I had already started this, but I didn't have very many stitches in it, so we didn't want to show it. So I made some more progress on it over the last couple of weeks. And yeah, so now we're ready to show it. So, sorry, sometimes does your brain like ever just like stop for a second and you're like, wait, what was I doing? What was I saying? So what I ended up starting for my new wild card is a Dimensions kit. So this is a Dimensions Gold collection kit called Cabin Fever. I am stitching with the Dimensions or with a kit floss and the kit fabric, which is an 18 count Aida that is very stiff. This is the first time I have stitched on Aida in 30 years. I have not stitched on Aida in a long time. I don't enjoy it, I have to tell you. And it might just be because this is a super stiff Aida, but whatever. Anyway, here is my start. So as you can see, I'm very much in the background working on the trees on the left-hand side of the design. There's little bits and pieces of sky and blue that are coming through there, but it's mostly just greens and blacks at this point. But I'm happy with it. It's a solid new start on a Dimensions piece because these are quite big. They're a real-time commitment. So that's how it's coming on. The one thing I will say about this is because it's 18 count, and many of you know, Dimensions is all right. What Dimensions does, one of the things that they're famous for is they don't just use shading to kind of get the depth in the to create dimension in their designs. They also use variable numbers of flosses that you will stitch with. So you can have anywhere from two strands of floss all the way up to 6 to kind of create that sense of depth and realism in the design. And on 18 count, even if you're just doing half stitches, if you're doing those with 6 strands of floss, it is something. It is not easy to stitch those sometimes. And so I actually had to, while stitching with this, I had to get out, it's an alternative to using a thimble. So it's a little sticky pad that you put on your fingers to create a buffer between your finger and the head of the needle, because after a few stitches, it starts to get really sore and tender because that needle is just pressing into your skin because you're pushing so hard to move it through the fabric. So this is definitely a piece where if you're doing a dimensions and you're having the same problems with sore fingers that I was having, you may want to get those little sticky finger thimble sticker thingies because I found that to be really helpful with this. But I'm looking forward to getting more time on it. I think it's going to be beautiful. I think it's going to be a really enjoyable stitch. You just have to be ready for, you just got to be ready for all those flosses. So that's where we are on that. Okay, next wanted to answer, we had some couple of questions that have come in on the last couple of videos, so wanted to make sure we responded to those. So the first came from Sarah, and she has a couple of questions here. So the first one was, when you do 1 stitch per square versus 2 stitches per square, does that throw your counting off? So she's talking about where I'm doing the 1/1 stitching on the skin for my fancy lady. So what I can say about that is, yes, it can throw off your counting. And what makes it even more complicated is what a lot of stitchers recommend, and I do as well, is if you're going to stitch 1/1 skin instead of 2/2, it could be it looks very blocky if you stitch it as charted. You have to kind of soften those edges a bit between stitches to get more of a blended, more realistic effect that doesn't look blocky. And so you're not stitching exactly as charted, and that can get confusing really, really quickly. It also can be harder to count for whatever reason. So one of the things that I like to do is, so for instance, on, you can see on my fancy lady here on at the Met, in her neckline or her chest area and on her arms, the highlight color, the palest color, is very dominant. There's a lot of stitches in that color. So what I like to do is where you have fewer stitches, and a good example is here in her arm where you have a lot of dark stitches. I like to try and get those in first to kind of create a barrier or a boundary, and then it eases a bit of the counting because you've kind of set some parameters to work within. The other thing I like to do is I try to anchor my 1/1 stitches with a 2/2 stitch that I know is in the right place, because then I can always come back to that and count from that to make sure I'm stitching in the right spot and stitching the right number of stitches. So it's probably kind of confusing, but the short answer to the question is yes, it can get confusing and difficult to count very easily. So it takes practice for sure. Sarah also asked, when you travel to Nairobi, do you have an interpreter or do they know English? And after so many trips, can you speak the language? So great question. And so if I'm going to be in a city, whether that's in Nairobi or another country, anytime you're in a major city, at least in East Africa. In West Africa, a lot of times French is a more dominant language. But in East Africa, English is, there's a lot of people who speak English fluently. In Kenya, English is actually the second of 2 national languages, with the other being Swahili. And so anyone who's had any sort of education or anything like that, if you're in a city, people are very fluent in English, you have no problem speaking to them. Even if you go out into a village, you can almost always find a couple of people who are fluent enough in English that you can have a conversation. A lot of times if you get onto a farm, you will find they have not quite enough English to be conversational. And so in that case, you definitely need to have an interpreter. But unless I'm going out to the field, I don't have an interpreter. And I have picked up a few words of English over time, or not English, of Swahili over time. Yes, I speak English fluently, although you wouldn't know. So I do speak a few words of Swahili.
I'm glad you're still trying.
Oh my goodness.
Never stop.
I do know a few words of Swahili, not enough to be truly conversational, but I can say hello, which is the most common way of saying hello is to say jambo. I can say thank you or thank you very much. And thank you is asante, or thank you very much, asante sana, if you feel really thankful. Karibu is welcome, and that word functions very much like welcome does in the English language, where it's both like welcome to my home. So if you go to someone's home or business, they will say karibu. And if you say asante or thank you, they will say karibu, as in you're welcome. I think one of my favorites is one that my Ugandan colleague uses often, which is sawa sawa, and that means that's fine, okay, yep, that's good. So yeah, just a few words there. Another thing that's very interesting that most people don't realize is that there are, even though Swahili is a national language, there are many dialects of Swahili. And so from one village or one region to another, there's a lot that's going to be common. But a lot of times, even an interpreter, if they're from a different region, there will be certain dialectic differences that they have to navigate to be able to interpret with the local Swahili speakers that may use some different things than what they're accustomed to in their country or their region. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay, the next question came from Anne. She very kindly wished me a good trip to Nairobi and asked if I was going to be going back to the needlework shop that I visited, that we shared about in an earlier video. So sadly, I did not have an opportunity to do that this time. I was staying in a different hotel that's not too far away from that shop, but not within walking distance for certain, and just didn't have time to get over there. And I managed to take all the supplies I needed with me this time, so I didn't have anything I needed to go for. So I didn't make it over there again this time. And then another question came from Linda, also having a question about traveling, and asked how long my flight to Nairobi is. So obviously that varies. There's a lot of different flights and carriers that are going in and out of Nairobi. I have a favorite. I've basically sold my soul to Delta. So I always try and fly on Delta whenever I can. I've had really great experiences with them. This is not a paid promotion for Delta, but and I like to fly through Amsterdam. They have, a couple different places that you can fly through, but that's where I prefer to go through. Anyway, so they, usually it takes me, so when I leave Seattle, my flight from Seattle to Amsterdam is usually between 9 and 10 hours. It varies a little bit depending on a number of factors, but that's typical. And then I have about a 4-hour layover in Amsterdam, and then it's usually another 7, 8, 9 sometimes hours from Amsterdam to Nairobi, usually more in the 8-hour range. So door to door, from the time I leave my house, do all the airport immigration stuff, waiting around to board the flight, to the time I leave the house to the time I actually get to my hotel for the day or for the night in Nairobi, it's usually about a 26-hour trip. So, and I try not to sleep except for maybe 1 or 2 hours at most, because that usually helps me adjust to the new time zone a little bit more quickly if I'm completely shattered when I get there. So that's how long it takes to get there. Okay, that's it for Q&A. I also wanted to share a little bit of stitchy kindness that we got. So Debbie, who's one of our regular viewers, some of you will recall that in recent videos, I was trying to track down an old chart by Marie Barber that was in an old issue of Just Cross Stitch magazine. And many of you very kindly offered me various versions of that. And so I was able to get a copy of it. But it was a beautiful chart with some cardinals in it and a floral arrangement. And one of our viewers, Debbie, had reached out and she said that she happened to see this beautiful quilt block that had cardinals and it was birdhouses and this wintry, snowy scene. And she thought of me and she thought I would like it. And so she charted it, which is amazing to me that she would go to the trouble of doing that. And she was right. I loved it. I thought it was just beautiful. She got wonderful colors. And so we'll share a picture of that because it's a digital chart that she created. So we'll just share a picture of what that looks like. But thank you, Debbie. That was so thoughtful of you, and I really love it. So I'm really happy to have that in my collection, and we'll look forward to stitching it someday. So for those of you who don't want to stick around for the globetrotting, we'll talk about plans really quickly, and then we'll let you go on to your next floss tube. And then those who want to hear a little bit more about my trip, we'll share that and then wrap it up for the day. So plans for us, I am going to spend some time working on my Bittersweet Trio. That's the only WIP you didn't see today. Sorry. But I am going to spend some time working on that. Obviously, we'll continue working on my weekend stitch. I'm going to put in another week on my wild card that you just saw a few minutes ago. So we'll be working on Cabin Fever. We'll hopefully get some time on my new Christmas cheer pin pillow, the Merry Christmas pillow. And obviously Gary is going to be working on his 2 pieces, maybe. he'll work on them. Right, won't you, honey?
Of course.
Yes.
Because you ask.
So nicely.
Well, I have to sand a deck, fix a house,
Do grown up.
before August. So there you go.
Oh, jeez. Too many grown-up things are happening right now for us. So that's what we're going to be working on. And so hopefully we'll have some good progress to show you the next time you come to visit. So if this is your stopping off point, thanks again for coming to spend time with us. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about my trip to Kenya, and then we'll wrap it up. So we
Can I
spent...
say anything about Providence?
Yes, I'd love it if you said something about Providence.
Okay, well, that's enough.
Do you want to start with that?
No, we'll start with yours.
Okay.
I've said all I'm going to say, though. No, when you're ready.
Okay. So we went to a couple of different places while we were out in the field. I want to talk about 2 of them in particular. So the first place we went to visit is a local rice growers cooperative. And this was a really cool model to see. Basically, it's a bunch of farmers that have banded together in this area. It's one of the areas of Kenya where they grow rice. And if you know Kenya, it tends to be a country where, when I think of Kenya, the commodities that I think of are dairy. I think about maize, which in the US we call corn, but many other places refer to it as maize. They grow a lot of maize in Kenya. Tea and coffee. Those are very frequently, they're some of their big ag commodities. I don't typically think of rice, but they do grow rice in Kenya. So this particular region grows rice, and many of the farmers there have joined this cooperative. And what they're doing is they are using regenerative agriculture practices, so good climate-friendly practices, and they are multiplying rice seed to sell to other farmers. And they're doing it in a way that is, they're doing various grades of kinds of varieties. They're growing different kinds so that, that are at different price points, so that there's good quality options available regardless of what your budget is for growing or buying seed. So it was really exciting to see what they're doing. We got to see a lot of different things. I took some pictures. There's a section that we visited where they're bagging up the rice seed, and so you can see the seeds all, on the ground, and they're kind of moving it into bags, and then they're weighing the bags to make sure they've got it the right weight. And then that moves along to a different part of the process where it goes into distribution. And it's interesting because the seed has a treatment on it. So we were asking about this when I was there because it looks pink or red. And I was like, rice is not pink. But it's a special treatment that they put on the rice seed to protect it. Much like here in the US, a lot of times if you buy a seed, it'll have a special coating or treatment on it as well. And so they've got that on this rice to help protect the seed, to help, help it in the productivity and what have you. So it was really neat to see that. This particular cooperative is doing some really cool things as far as, in the U.S., and I'm speaking about the U.S. more so than Europe because I'm more familiar with farming here, although even here I'm not an ag expert. But, here you've got big farms where, you're growing lots of acres of whatever you're growing. And so the farmers will have their own equipment. In Africa, you're dealing with smallholder farmers who might be growing on 1 or 2 hectares of land. It's a very small plot, and they're surviving on just a few dollars of income per day. And so they can't afford, mechanization and tractors and, some of these things that we are typical part of farming here in the global north. And so what the co-op does is the members of the co-op all kind of come together and they purchase the necessary equipment that they need to farm. And as long as you're a member in good standing, you can get a really great price on having a tractor come out or whatever the kind of machinery is that you need during certain seasons on the farm to make it easier to farm. So they can do that through the co-op, which is really great. There's other services that the co-op provides that make farmers' lives easier. But another thing that this co-op is doing, which is what is really cool, is when you have seed production, especially for things like rice, there tends to be waste. So you've got the seed itself, but then you've got all this straw that is left over that tends to go to waste or get burned, and then that can cause problems with, adding to poor air quality and climate and all kinds of issues. And so what this co-op is doing is they are using a climate-friendly practice to turn that rice straw into a product that's called biochar. And then that is bagged up as a fertilizer, and it ends up being able to be reused on a farm because it's been broken down. So it's really cool because they're bringing really great climate-friendly, smart farming practices into this community, and the farmers are all working together to make it happen and get their seed out to other farmers across the country. So very exciting. It was really inspiring to see what they're doing there. The other thing that I got to do was go to a farm and visit some really cool things that are happening there. So the organization that I'm working with, they have a program that's called Village-Based Advisors. And basically what it is, these are like model farmers or demonstration farmers that are part of a program where they get access to new seeds or varieties of seeds. They get access to new technologies. They learn better farming practices. Then they go and they put those things into practice on their farm, and then they bring farmers from their local community in and show them, I'm getting more produce this way. I'm getting better yields this way. I'm having less problems with pests because I'm doing this. And then they help teach those other farmers about what they're doing, and it brings the whole community up. So it's a really cool program, but it's basically extension, but it's like kind of grassroots extension service. I won't get into a lot of the specifics just because you guys will probably be bored. But basically, one of the things that we're trying to do is help them figure out how to make that sustainable so that the farmers that are part of the program are finding ways to turn that into a profitable venture, so that they'll keep doing it. We're trying to make sure that they're able to partner with the local government, because government will also provide extension services, but they don't have enough agents to reach all of the farmers. So, we're working with them to figure out ways to introduce more digital content. So one extension agent can reach a lot more farmers. So you can get information out about fertilizer or weather or what have you. And so it was really inspiring. We went to the farm of a woman named Agnes, who is a village-based advisor for her area. And it was so great to see, she's got these plots where she's showing, okay, if I just grow my maize in the traditional way, this is what it looks like. But if I've introduced this practice and this practice, these are the results I'm getting. And then if I use all the best practices and the new seeds, these are the results. And you can visually see the difference in her yields. So it was really great to walk through her fields. The director of my team was there with me, and it was really great because he grew up on a farm in Zimbabwe. And so he was able to take, the maize that she's growing and even teach her some things while we were standing there right in her field, things that she can pass on to other farmers. So it was great because then, after we had a chance to kind of tour her field and see what she's doing, they had a big farmer field day where a bunch of the local farmers came. Some folks that have been through the program and have then turned that into more of an entrepreneurial kind of thing and started their own businesses doing some other things came along. And so it was a really great day to connect with a lot of different farmers and to be inspired by what Agnes and her husband are doing on their farm and in their community. So, sorry, I will stop talking now and let Gary share about his trip to Providence because I'm chatting away too long. Go ahead, Gary, over to you.
I didn't say any of that.
You didn't, but I felt like I was starting to get rambly.
Well, at least we know what you do.
The people can hear you.
That's hence the microphone. What am I talking about?
Your trip to Providence.
I went to Providence, Rhode Island. For anybody who's international, it's not in New York. It's its own state, and I'm sure you knew that, or could have known that. Anyway, I went to Rhode Island for a family reunion. I don't share the family pictures because they didn't have the choice. I didn't ask them, so I can't share those. But I did take a few pictures of a local park called Roger Williams Park, and I'll put those up. I might have a couple of other ones that I can show of just stuff that'll just appear while I'm talking now. Anyway, it was just nice to. It was nice to be back, and not nice to be back, because on the East Coast there's much more humidity than on the West Coast. I have to check the time. We're running out of time. On one of the cameras, only records for 20 minutes. We're on our third section. Anyway, yeah, it was a great trip. I was glad to see family. Yeah, I saw friends. We ate some food, some good food, some bad food. I do know this: next time I go, which might be about a year or more, I'll take pictures of the food there. There's just food there you can't get anyplace else, and most of it's good. Anyway, that was my trip. I'm home now.
And we are happy to have him back. We missed him very much. So I think that wraps it up for us today. Thanks for sticking in there with us. We hope that you are all doing well. We hope that you are enjoying your stitching. If you like our videos, please do give us a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Yep. Hit the bell so you get notifications when we post new videos. We love it when you leave us comments, or you can send email to me at globetrottingstitcher@gmail.com. And follow me. I'm not as good as I should be about posting updates to Instagram between videos, but I do periodically, so you can follow me there. I'm globetrotting_stitcher. And I did want to say, just before we sign off, whatever we're doing, that our friends in Canada, I know you all have been dealing with wildfires, and it's a really horrible situation there. And so just know we are thinking about you. We're praying for you. Same with our friends in Europe and here in the US who have been dealing with heat waves and just horrible temperatures. Yikes. Hang in there. Summer's coming. Winter is coming, people. Not fast enough, but it is coming. So with that, it's been great to spend time with you today. Thanks again for choosing to hang out with us. We look forward to seeing you soon. And in the meantime, happy stitching.
You said stoon.
Shush.
We'll see you real soon.
I've used up most of my words.
Just say sty.
Somebody's getting a beat down, people. I got some dealing to do. So we'll see you very soon. Happy stitching. Bye-bye.
Sty.